This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everyone, and good evening, as per your time zone. This is Roshan. Welcome to the demo session on cloud performance engineering in DevOps. We are launching a course on cloud performance engineering in DevOps from today, and we'll be continuing. Before we get started, so this is something about me. I have around 14 plus years of experience into IT. Mostly worked on the performance engineering side, Java and Python development. I'm on the cloud side. I'm architect, associate cloud professional, uh, and involved in automation using Java, Python, Terraform, Ansible, PL SQL, Shell scripting, and Selenium. Currently, I'm working as an SRE, principal SRE. Okay, this will be the agenda of our session today. We'll start with a question. Uh, I would like you to think through and answer that question. We'll understand then software development and deployment evolution, how software has been developed and deployed over a period of time. Uh, and then we'll understand the course syllabus, what all we're going to cover in this course. We'll set the expectation. The idea is to set the expectations, and then why and what will I learn by the end of this course. You'll understand what you're gonna take, the take home message from this course, and what you're gonna learn here. And then we're gonna open for the Q&A. And in between, if you have any questions, if you need to interrupt me, feel free to write in the chat window. I have my chat window open in my another screen, a second monitor, so I can have a look into that and I can answer your question as and when the time permits. Okay, so let's get started here. So coming to the question, okay. So the question is that our performance engineers, or basically anyone basically here, now not about the performance engineers, but the DevOps engineers, the SREs, the developers. So I would like to take this thing in generic and expected to know this. Are we expected to know this as per the current market situation, how the industry is moving? Are we expected to know these things like DevOps, microservices, containers, and cloud? Anyone who would like to answer this question? Do you think these things are relevant in the current world scenario, current market scenario, the IT world?
Yes,
Yeah,
nowadays
yeah.
people are expecting all these performance testing engineering course also.
Exactly. So the answer to this question is very much yes. And we'll understand this picture once we understand the software development and deployment evolution. Why are we talking about cloud nowadays from last 4 to 5 years in generic? I would tell you why people are talking more about the cloud, microservices, containers, and DevOps. Nowadays we are talking about a lot of this stuff here. And once you understand this picture, the how the software has been developed and deployed over the years, you will get this. Coming to the cloud here, as we started with cloud, earlier back in 1980s, we used to work in the data center, right? If people needed to host an application, they would set up the data center on their own. It was a very costly thing to do. Not everyone can afford to set up a data center. It required a lot of like it was you have to purchase the land, you have to build the construction, you have to do infrastructure, and then you have to purchase the servers. It was a very costly thing. So back in 1980s, that's how we used to deploy our application in the data center, and people used to set up their own data center. Uh, we moved along around 2000, and then people used to use the hosted cloud solution. It came along. There were few players in the market who were able to provide the infrastructure, and then people started to use their application, these infrastructure to host their application. But currently, nowadays, from last 10 years, I would say, we are into the cloud. AWS has there from 2008, 7, 8, and we are into cloud. If we need to deploy our application, we don't need to worry about setting up a data center where we can, how can we do that? We do not need that much of a capital to deploy our application. We can simply go to any cloud service provider, public cloud service provider, uh, uh, be it AWS or Azure or GCP, Oracle, anyone public cloud service provider, and we can take leverage their resources. We can take their resources on rent, and we can host our application. That's how it's going on. And customers, people are moving to the cloud because they understand the importance of cloud. It is secure, and we don't need to set up the data center. It is a very costly thing to set up the data center, and we have realized this, and this has been booming. All the new startups you see now, there were so many startups coming up. Why they are coming up? Earlier, it was literally not possible for the startups to, because startups do not have that much of capital advantage. They don't have that much finance support. They cannot afford to construct a data center. They had ideas. They always had the ideas, but it was very difficult for the startups to set up the data center and then host their application. Now it's so much easy here in the cloud. Coming to this, the left here. Earlier, back in 1980s, we were working with waterfall model. If you, everyone in IT must know these terms. This, we used to develop all my application at once, and then we used to start to test it. There was no, there was a lot of problem with that particular methodology, I would say. And then we quickly realized that the disadvantages of waterfall, because once everything is developed and then you started to test, if anything fails in the testing, let's say phase, you cannot go and do your architectural changes. It was very difficult, costly thing to do architectural changes or basic design flaws. It was very difficult to change that, and so it was not good, right? So around 2000, we entered into agile phase where we divided the software development into various sprints, into various phases, we call it. So we developed the software into phases by phases. So we call this sprint 1, sprint 2, sprint 3, sprint 4, where your development and testing happened. We just took one portion of the software, let's say bigger application we're going to build, but we just took step-by-step process. We just finished one part, the core business, then we did development, testing, everything. Then we went to the customer and showed them, okay, this is how this is how your product would look like, a kind of a prototype. Are we going in a good direction? We took some feedback. Again, we started to work in the second sprint with some, we added more features. We rectified whatever we did in the last sprint. So this is how agile went on, right? So it was a much better than waterfall. But currently nowadays we are into DevOps world, DevOps, where everything is continuous. I don't want, if my developer is done writing the code, I don't want any delay in getting the code deployed in production. That's the idea. I don't want the least possible delay. With all the quality validations, with all the testing done first. It's not like without testing, once the developer writing the code and I'm deploying my code to production. No, it's not the case. In DevOps, everything is automated. Whatever we did in Agile, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm not going to do anything extra here in DevOps, but I'm going to automate the entire process. I don't want uh, an environment dependency. Let's say earlier back in Agile, uh, developer was, you used to test in one environment, develop in one environment, testers were testing in another environment, testers raising bugs, defects, but developer is saying, no, it's not a defect, it's a configuration issue. I don't want that kind of a delay, and then things are slowed down. The time it takes to get my code to the production, it's very delayed in the case of agile. So we would like to streamline the process. We would like to proceed one step ahead of agile, and that's where this DevOps came, where all your development activity, your testing activity, your deployment activity, your monitoring activity, everything is automated. Well, let's say once the developer completes writing its code, and let's say the developer uploaded the code to GitHub, let's say. I want automatically the code to get built because I don't want any manual activity to be done after that. I will create a job and which will trigger the code to get built, Maven job, or I'm going to do that. Once my code is built, I'm going to create the jar file or war file, whatever we have it. We're going to store in some artifactory, and then I would like to deploy the same war file, jar file automatically to the testing environment. Now, automatically in the testing environment, there will be an automation engineer who will be triggering some code. Automatically, these things should happen. I don't want any manual intervention. Or these things are all these jobs, building the code, and having the jar file, war file, and then deploying the jar file or war file in a testing environment. Again, this is another job which will happen automatically after the code is built and successfully, and the code will be deployed to a testing environment. Then there will be an automation engineer who will be doing some functional automation testing. Once that is done, there will be performance engineers, testers who will be doing some performance job using some performance testing tool like Selenium, like JMeter or Loader, or any tool. The automation engineer would use tools like Selenium or QFT, any functional automation tool. Mostly the open source nowadays is Selenium. Then performance engineers there will be a job for the performance testers, JMeter job mostly, let's say, that will get triggered. There may be more tests like UAT, user acceptance testing, that will get triggered. Then security testing, then penetration testing. It depends on the organization how many testing you have in the pipeline. We call it CI/CD pipeline. We call it, and then everything is, once every code is ready, I'm going to deploy my code to production. And what I have done in the entire process, I have been doing the same thing. Whatever I did in Agile, I'm doing the same thing, but only difference is that I'm going to automate the entire process. That's what I'm doing in Agile, in DevOps. I'm automating the entire process so that it takes less time to deploy my code to production. That's the goal. That's the goal, to deploy the quality code to production, and without compromising on any quality validations like testing, without compromising on that. That's the DevOps. So we are into this phase, and it gets very much, it goes very much with the microservices, because nowadays we are working in microservices. Earlier, back in 1980, earlier days, we used to develop mostly the monolith application. A monolith application means where all your code logic resides on the application server. Everything is on the application server, tightly coupled. That's the monolith application. And then we have this n-tier application. It's a 3-tier application. Let's say you're working on a 3-tier application, app server, your web server, front-end server, web server, then your app server, logic server, and the database. On the app server, everything, all the code reside, logic, business logic reside on the app server. In the case of microservices, that's what happens in the monolith. So when all the code resides on the application server, your tightly coupled scenario, that's a monolith. Now we are breaking, nowadays, we are breaking the same monolith application into microservices, so that a code is not dependent, the logic is not dependent. The modules, whatever modules I'm going to create, different, let's say I have an application, let's say any Flipkart application, or any Walmart, or any application. So let's say you have modules there. something called search functionality, or then something called login functionality. Login is a use case or module, you can call it login. Uh, let's searching for a product is a one of the module. Payment is one of the module. In checking inventory, how many inventory I have, that is another module. So what I'm going to do, instead of writing all my code in one as a single tightly coupled unit, I'm going to divide it. I'm going to split it, and I'm going to create separate microservices, so that my code is not dependent. My modules are not dependent on each other. What happens in monolith, even if for the smallest of the region, right, smallest of the bug, your application can be down. In entire application availability could be in danger, at risk in a monolith application. But in the case of microservices, it's not that case. Consider this app, let's say Swiggy app or your Ola Uber app. Let's say if notification is not working, it doesn't mean you cannot book a cab or could not order a food, right? So notification is one microservices, but ordering a cab, logging into the Uber account, searching for your route or the destination and how many available options you have. Same thing goes for the Swiggy app, searching for the food items. So these are separate microservices. I don't want dependency between the modules, so that if one of the modules, let's say notification, it is not working, it doesn't mean it will impact the other functionality. So that's the advantage of microservices. Microservices has a lot of advantages to offer, a lot many advantages to offer than monolith. So currently we are into this microservices world. We are trying to split. If I have already have an application, monolith application, we are trying, the companies are trying to migrate to move from monolith to microservices, so that their availability becomes more. They are highly resilient. That's what they're trying by microservices. And the new startups, whatever new startups are coming, they are already into microservices because they know the importance of microservices. So that's how the software has been developed. And the question is, where do we run these microservices? Okay, then we run these microservices in containers. Earlier, what used to happen, let's say I'm developing one application, let's say tiny application, few KB, few MB, whatever. I used to take the physical server box, the full box, the higher with a lot of CPU, a lot of RAM. I used to deploy my tiny little code, my application in that physical server back in. So that's how something starts like that. Okay, then you progress. That's how we have been doing. Humans have been doing all along our life. So we start with this physical server. We used to waste a lot of resources here because we used to take a bigger box because we didn't know any other way, right? So we took the bigger box, we deployed the little application, few KB application, but in the course of, and then we used that application. But in what we did, we wasted a lot of resources. Someone realized around 2000, and what the guy did, he installed one virtualization software on the physical server. Virtualization software, VMware has virtualization software like VirtualBox from Oracle, they have it. There are so many virtualization software. Once you install that virtualization software on the physical servers, we can create multiple VMs. You must be working on the VMs, and underneath there is a big physical server, and on top of that there is a like a virtualization software. And then once we installed the virtualization software, we could create VMs. Now, instead of hosting just one application on the physical server, on the VM itself, I can install application. And that's how we have been doing. So we are using one VM for app server, one VM for web server, one VM for DB server. That's how we are doing 3-tier application. And let's see, if we have more servers, we're using different VMs. In this course, we utilized a lot of resources. We don't want our resources, this hardware to be underutilized. There is no point in underutilizing it, right? It is waste. If we are underutilizing our hardware, it is not going to benefit anyone. We should use the hardware to its best potential. So we used virtualization. VMs came into picture. We were able to install many. We used the same hardware to create more VMs, and then we installed more applications. Good. It was a very good thing. But now we are into containerization phase. It was a virtualization phase, and we are into containerization phase. We are creating containers inside the VM now. Inside one VM, we are creating multiple containers. Each container will have one application. For example, if it's a 3-tier application, I needed 3 VMs. Let's say one for the web server, one for the app server, one for the database server. I needed 3 VMs. And now what I can do, I can take one VM and I can create 3 containers. One container for web server, one container for app server, one container for database server. I can do this way. So in one VM itself, I can create 3 containers and I can host my application, 3-tier application. The idea is to utilize the resource better, efficiently. I don't want my resource to be underutilized. That's how we are doing. And in the process of creating containers, we are basically these microservices, because these microservices are for the dedicated purpose, a specialized subset of your bigger application, these microservices. We deploy these microservices on the containers. So these all things go together very well. Everyone is using cloud. Everyone is using cloud. They're all developing in microservices. They're all deploying their microservices in containers. And for the deployment, they're using DevOps. So these all things are connected, and no one is separate from each other. Everything goes together, and that's how this phase we are in right now, where people are talking about DevOps, microservices, containers, and cloud. No, I don't know any CV or any job description without these things. Whether it's a performance tester, a profile, a performance engineer, or DevOps engineer, or SRE engineers, or even developers, everyone has to know this, right? So to coming to the question here, any IT professional, I should say now, uh, expected to know this? Yes, they are expected to know this, and you show them this picture, they would understand where these things fit and why do we need to know this, right? Do we have any questions here? Anyone need more explanation on these things? We're gonna just take these things because I just wanted to introduce you, because our course syllabus is based around these 4 things. We're gonna cover these 4 things in our course primarily. That's why I just thought to introduce. We're gonna go in detail, much more detail about each of these things in our course. Okay.
Can you
So
tell more about containers?
yes, see, containers, like, you host your the runtime environment for microservices are containers. You host your microservices here in the containers. And how do you create containers? You need to, like, you installed virtualization software on the physical server to create VMs. On the VM, you're gonna install a container engine. You're gonna install container engine like Docker or Rocket or Container D or Podman. There are so many container engine. Like there were so many virtualization software. So in one VM, you're gonna take one VM. You're gonna install the container engine on top of your physical on the VM, and then you're gonna create containers. the idea is on the virtualization, when you install the virtualization software here, the VMs virtualizes the hardware, okay? The VMs will virtualize the hardware, but when you install a container engine on the VM, you're gonna virtualize the host operating system. I'm gonna show you, okay? I'm gonna show you, but that's the brief about it. So you just install a container engine on the VM, and then you can create containers. Okay,
Thanks.
there is a question in the chat. What is SRE? So SRE is a like a principal. It basically stands for a site reliability engineer. So every company is now looking for an SRE. Most of the companies SRE, which is responsible. The SREs are responsible for maintaining the high availability in the production. It takes care of SRE has a lot of responsibilities. It takes care of production issues, kind of a production support role, where they are expected to make sure that the production is highly available, your application is highly available, resilient, and and they do automation activity so that all the manual activities can be avoided. So a lot. So basically, SRE stands for Site Reliability Engineer. Okay, are we good with this? Any more explanation required? I'm gonna take you through. Okay, I can only cover brief. I cannot cover the entire thing. So we're gonna cover. We're gonna talk a lot more things in the real course. There's a question between monolith and tier. See, monolith. See, there is the you cannot compare apple with oranges basically. So you can only compare monolith with microservices. Here n tier I'm showing because we entered into the 3-tier phase. Around 2000 we started to work on the 3-tier. Mostly we understood earlier there was no 3-tier concept. When we started with the software development, we used to deploy. There was no 3-tier concept like app server, web server, database server. You should ask the comparison between monolith and microservices, not monolith and 3-tier. Monolith means, let's say it is the web server, it is app server, this is the database server. So every code resides on the application server. It's tightly coupled. So all the modules that you have, let's say, let me just show you. Let's say if you having let's say you have this application here. Okay, let's say you have this application, complete application, and let's say you are dividing it application. You have, let's say, 4 modules. Let's say you have 4 modules. This is module 1. Let me change the color. This is module 1. Let's say this is module 2. This is, let's say, this is module 3, and this is, let's say, module 4. Let's say something like that. So this is your application, full application. This is module 1, doing some functionality. Let's say if it's a bookstore app or any application. Let's say this is your inventory. This guy is responsible for inventory related stuff. Let's say, okay, and let's say this is for the payments. I request everyone to be on mute, please. But I can mute everyone directly. So let's say this is for the payments, okay, and let's say this is for the search. So I've just did different modules, okay. And this is for some other activity, some other module, let's say. So when I say monolith, what I mean that if I'm writing the code, so these are different modules in my application. All these modules make my application, okay. So when I say monolith, let's say I'm writing the code, okay. Let's say methods, F1, functions, I'm writing F1, F2, F3. Let's say I'm going till F10, let's say F10. Then for this inventory, I have F1 to F10. And let's say for the payments, I have F11, F12, F13, and let's say it goes on till F20. So when I say the monolith application, basically what I mean that when I'm writing F12 code, let's say, I can call these functions anytime. Anytime I can call these functions. These functions are called anywhere and everywhere. For the payments, let's say for the payments, if I'm writing something in the payments, I will call the methods directly. Let's say I'm calling F2. I'm writing for the search, I'm calling the function which I'm writing for the payments or the inventory. I can call F12 here. The core is being called everywhere and like anywhere and everywhere. There is a huge dependency across all these modules. What happens if, even for the smallest region, let's say if F12 is not working, something problem and something new got deployed, and there is some problem with this F12, my entire application could be down because there is a huge dependency of this F12 everywhere, huge dependency of all the functions everywhere in my application. The idea is to split this and make this independent. And that is when this microservices come, because I don't want any such dependencies between the modules. If inventory needs something from the search, I'm going to expose some API in the inventory. They are called REST API. I'm going to expose some API, and the search can get the information by calling the API. And these modules communicate with each other through REST API calls. In the case of microservices, I'm talking. In the case of monolith, I'm calling the functions everywhere and anywhere. Okay, there's a huge dependency in the case of monolith, but in the case of microservices, I am making it independent. I don't want to call functions from one module to another module. If I need some information, I will take it from the REST API. I will invoke the REST API. I will expose REST API for each of these modules, and I'm going to get the information by calling the REST API. That's how I will do. So there is a less dependency here in the code. So let's say if one of the modules, let's say notification, is not working, it doesn't mean that you cannot order a food or you cannot book a cab. You can still do that because it's an independent unit. Notification not working doesn't mean it will impact the entire application. So that's the brief difference, okay, between monolith and microservices application. I hope you guys have understood this. We're going to talk in detail. See, all these things not cover in just 10 to 15 minutes. I can only give you a high level picture. We're going to take everything and we're going to spend hours here. 10 hours here, 10 hours here, 10 hours here, 10 hours here. We're going to spend hours here talking about everything in detail. So I can only give you brief right now, a high level picture. Yeah, but we're going to cover these things in our course journey. This is the point I wanted to make using this slide. Okay, coming to the course syllabus, what are we going to cover? We're going to cover cloud. As for in the cloud side, we're going to cover AWS, primarily AWS. I'm going to give you something on the Azure and GCP as well, where you can get started quickly. Once you know one cloud service provider, it's easy to learn others. Like same thing goes for performance testing tool. If you know the load runner or JMeter, you can learn any other program, any other performance testing tool, like your RPT or your OATS, any other, but the concept remains the same. Okay, so we're going to cover AWS primarily here. We're going to cover full AWS, and I'm going to talk also about Azure and GCP, but not in length. We're going to talk in length about AWS. Second, we're going to cover is the Linux command line, because whatever we're going to discuss, it's all about Linux. Everyone has to be comfortable with Linux. If it's not, it's very difficult to take care of these things, because everything we're going to deploy our application in Linux. That's how it's being done. We don't deploy our application in Windows mostly. We deploy our application mostly in Linux. So we're going to talk about Linux command line. If anyone is new to the Linux, that's fine. whatever we're going to discuss, it's from very scratch. You don't need to have any prerequisite knowledge. You just need an enthusiasm to learn. That is what it is required. We're going to talk about software application architecture, how it's been architectured softwares. We're going to talk about microservices. We're going to talk about container engine, a Docker, how to create microservice, how to create containers, and how to host microservices. We're going to talk about container engine here, Docker. Once you create the containers, you need to manage the containers, right? For that, we'll talk about container orchestration engine like Kubernetes. We're going to talk about Kubernetes in length. We're going to spend 7 to 8 hours in Kubernetes itself. It's a very important thing. Everyone is expected to know Kubernetes. You can just go to any interview, they would expect you to know Kubernetes. You're going to understand what is Kubernetes from very basics. Everything is from very basics. We're going to learn from ABC to the writing sentences. That's how I can tell you.
What is orchestration means?
See, orchestration means you're going to perform a lot of other activity. Like orchestration means automation, your deployment, your load balancing. Orchestration means adding much more features. When you create the containers, you need to orchestrate them. Where the containers will be deployed, on which physical server it will be deployed, how the load balancing would work. Because when you have multiple containers, you need to load balance also. You need to auto schedule also. You need to how it will be deployed. That also importance. How auto scaling will work. You would like your containers to auto scale. Let's say you have 4 containers. We call it pods basically. In Kubernetes world, we don't call it containers, we call it pods. One pod will have mostly one container, but one pod can have multiple containers also. But we talk of pods. Let's say you have 4 pods and you are handling, let's say, 100 user. All of a sudden 100 user went to 200. You need to scale more pods to accommodate to handle that many user requests, more user requests. So you need to auto scale things. So when I say orchestration, it takes everything into account: your load balancing, your deployment, your auto scaling, your scheduling. It covers everything. So that is what Kubernetes offer. It is an container orchestration engine. It doesn't create. See, we create containers using container engine like Docker. Kubernetes underneath uses the container engine also. They have to use a container engine because it is container engine which creates the container. But Kubernetes is an orchestration. It orchestrates the containers. It will manage the containers. How the auto scaling will work, how the load balancing would work, how it will be deployed, things like that comes under orchestration. Okay. We're going to talk about performance engineering and DevOps. I hope I answered your question. It was a good question.
Yes, I
Sure. So we'll talk about performance engineering in DevOps, how performance engineering fits in DevOps. Where are we? What is our responsibility? What all could be our responsibility? And we'll talk about continuous performance testing in CI/CD pipeline. We will create our JMeter job. We'll understand what is our contribution as a performance tester engineer. What is our contribution in the CI/CD pipeline? See, CI/CD pipeline is at the organization level. Okay, mostly a DevOps engineers would create a CI/CD pipeline. Our as a performance tester engineer, we need to understand, we need to contribute to the CI/CD pipeline by giving our job, let's say JMeter job. We need to understand how to create a job, how to will using any CI tool. We're going to talk about Jenkins here. We will use CI tool as the Jenkins, continuous integration tool as the Jenkins, and we're going to create our JMeter job. We're going to use JMeter job. We'll understand how to create a JMeter job when you're using CI Jenkins as the CI tool. Automatic triggering of the email. Let's say once you run your job, you need to know whether the test passed or failed. With all the build logs, we're going to attach it with in the email. We're going to receive an email. So we're going to talk about continuous performance testing in CI/CD pipeline. automatically, and we'll talk about DevOps in general first, how DevOps work. We're going to create a pipeline basically. And everything is hands-on. That's what we're going to do. So we are covering the same thing: cloud, AWS, microservices, understanding of microservices, Docker, how to create containers, container orchestration engine is very important, and DevOps. And everywhere we're going to use Linux. So dedicated session on Linux is we are taking up, so that you guys are comfortable working through all these things. So that's the course syllabus. If you go in detail in each of this, we're going to cover, let's say, in the cloud side, we're going to cover these many things. We're going to talk about cloud from very basics. It is from very basics. The idea is to go very basics, start from like nothing, something like that. Cloud computing introduction, why cloud computing, what is cloud computing, service models, infrastructure as service, platform as service, software as service, various deployment models do you have, public, private, hybrid, cloud. We're going to create our own AWS account, and we're going to perform everything, how to set up a budget, we'll understand the core cloud concepts, we'll understand what is the regions, what is availability zones. We'll talk about IAM, we'll talk about EC2, how to provision EC2 in AWS cloud, what is private, public, and elastic cloud, how do you connect your instance remotely, what is security group, how do you launch your website, will install a web server on the EC2 instance. I'm going to see how to talk about storage services, EBS, EFS, S3. If things are new to you, don't worry. We're going to cover all these things, okay? And after this, you will be you'll understand things. You can talk to anyone working in cloud. You can give any interview. You'll feel confident and you'll be relaxed. So if things are new to you, don't worry, okay? That's what we're going to learn here. We're going to talk about networking, how VPC works, serverless services. We have Lambda, API Gateway, SNS, CloudFormation, Beanstalk. Very important, Elastic, load balancing and auto scaling group. How auto scaling? How do you auto scale servers when there is extra load? How to set that up? How it is integrated with load balancing. We're going to talk about monitoring in the AWS CloudWatch, X-rays. We're going to talk about a lot more stuff in it. That's the cloud thing we're going to cover. We will take mostly AWS, and we're going to cover that. To know other Azure and GCP, you need to know one first. It's very easy to learn others, other cloud service providers. We're going to take care of that also. There's a session where we'll talk about, if you know one cloud service provider, how would you progress on other cloud service provider if there is a need. We'll talk about that as well. On the Linux command line, I know that everyone is first needs the basics. See, we're gonna make your basics strong here. Once your basics are strong, we're gonna lay the strong foundation in each of these things, and then we'll take you we'll ramp up things here. So when I say Linux command line, I would like you to get comfortable as much as you are comfortable with Windows. That's how I would like to take this subject. Get as comfortable with Linux as you are with Windows. So I know people get scared of Linux when they see the black screen, but I don't want you to feel that way. It is just an operating system, nothing else. Like how Windows is an operating system, Linux is also an operating system. Just an operating system. You just need to know how to get the information, how to operate. That's all you need. And then you'll be comfortable. As simple as that. That's what we're going to do here. We're going to take care of the basics, how to get system information, hardware information, performance monitoring and statistics, the commands to get those, how to get user information and management, how to work with file and directory commands, how to do process management, file permissions, networking, how to archive a file. So for everything, we're going to relate to the Windows. Let's say for archiving, In Windows, we use zip file, right? In like 7G you use, or zip WinRAR you use. How do you do the same thing in Linux? That the idea is to think that, okay, you do this thing in Windows. How can I do the same thing in Linux? We're going to talk in that way. How to install something, how to search for something, how to do SSH logins, disk usage, disk transfer, directory navigation, and many more. We're going to talk about shell scripting as well. So once we cover the basics, we're going to talk about shell scripting, how to write shell scripting. So shell scripting is the thing for the automation. For automation, you have to write shell scripting. Then you can automate the manual task that you are doing in your organization using shell scripting. So that will be the syllabus for the Linux command line. On the software application architecture, we're going to talk about the monolith application. What do we mean by monolith application? What is advantages, disadvantages? What is microservices? The advantages, disadvantages. With the runtime environment for microservices, we're going to talk in length about this. And then we'll talk about container engine, because this is where you create the containers using Docker. We're going to talk about Docker. Why do we need Docker? And what is Docker Hub? How do we install Docker? What are the common Docker operations? How to build images using Docker file? What is Docker volumes? Docker network? We'll talk about so many things. Okay, we're going to install Docker Compose. What is Docker Compose? What is the use of Docker Compose? We're going to talk a lot more about container engine. Once we are done with this, we're going to talk about container orchestration engine. Container orchestration is very important. Here we'll talk about Kubernetes in length. This is what we are covering for 7 to 8 hours. But this is required. What is Kubernetes? From very basics. Okay, what is a pod? How do pods to deploy? Multi-container pod networking, pod lifecycle, services that you have, node port, cluster IP, load balancer services. What is replica set? CloudWatch container insight. How do you monitor the Kubernetes cluster in AWS? Then very important, the auto scaling part, horizontal pod auto scaler. Automatically, you would like your pods to auto scale and cluster auto scaler. Let's say you basically install or deploy pods in the nodes. If node is not there, how pods would get auto scaled, right? For that, we need to have cluster auto scaler as well. First, create the cluster using auto scaling group, which we'll talk about in AWS session. You should look at this here, auto scaling group. We're going to create nodes here, and then we're going to create pods. We'll understand how to do that using kubectl commands. We're going to cover this, everything, kubectl commands. When we're going to create EKS, we'll talk about EKS, the AWS offering of Kubernetes, Elastic Kubernetes service. We'll understand how performance engineering fits in DevOps, what is our responsibility, the DevOps lifecycle. We'll understand elements, how performance engineering fits in DevOps. So, and implementing continuous performance testing, how do we do that? We'll create a job, we'll create a CI/CD pipeline. We'll understand things by doing it, not by just theoretical, but by doing it. And you're going to practice along with me. We're going to create an AWS account, and we're going to practice everything. Okay, so we'll understand in the DevOps only. We're going to talk about continuous performance testing in DevOps. What is Jenkins? How to install Jenkins? Jenkins architecture. What is GitHub, Docker Hub? How do we integrate GitHub and Docker Hub using Jenkins? What is CI/CD pipeline? How to create a CI/CD pipeline? How to create a JMeter job, freestyle job? How to do automated feedbacks, email notification. And this is the snapshot I have taken from one of my sessions, live sessions, where I have created 4 jobs. One for the Git job, where I have a integrated with GitHub, and automatically the next all these jobs would get triggered. You're building website in testing environment, doing a JMeter job, and then pushing the code to production. Everything is automated here. We'll understand that. So everyone, we're gonna create our own AWS account. Okay, like the one I have here. Everyone will have the AWS account, needs to create an AWS account. I will guide you and how to create it, and we're gonna practice everything here. We're gonna create our. So this is how AWS Management Console looks, and yeah, depending on what you need to do, you need to go to the right service. You can see the number of services. We're gonna go to the right services, and we're gonna perform some activity. We have a lot many services here. EC2 will cover Lambda. We have Kubernetes service, Elastic Kubernetes service. We have S3 EFS, S3 Glacier. We'll talk about. We're going to talk about a lot more services. We're going to get comfortable. The idea is to make you guys comfortable. So, what will I learn by the end of this course? The course starts with core cloud concepts and how cloud implementation differs. We're going to talk about cloud as I have been talking about. We're going to talk about cloud. We're going to talk about Linux command line. We're going to talk about Docker. We're going to talk about Kubernetes. We're going to talk about DevOps, CI/CD pipeline, JMeter job. We're going to talk about everything. Okay. Cover around 25 to 25 AWS services. You'll be very much comfortable. It will lay a very strong foundation. If you're looking for certification like cloud practitioner and solution architect, it will lay a very strong foundation. And after attending this course, you need to learn something more, from the exam point of view, and then you can write those exams as well. So I have covered almost everything, and the bottom line is that everything is from very scratch. That's how we do it. Nothing, no prerequisite knowledge is required. You will be practicing along with me. You need to follow what I have been instructing, and all we need is your enthusiasm to learn. That's all it is required. Nothing more. So you can find all this information in the link here. If you can, anything. Anyway, this video will be shared. This is getting a recording. I'm going to share this link to everyone. And if you go over these links, same information is updated here. What all we are covering. You can find some demo videos which I have done for the last batch, like the one which I'm doing today. Same thing. And we have started with this today. We're gonna continue, and you're gonna get some feedback about my students, and it's gonna take around 40 to 45 hours. Yes, this is a long course. It is because we are covering a lot detail. 40 to 45 hours. We're gonna meet every day, 1 hour. 7:30 to 8:30. Yeah, so that will be the course syllabus, the one I have covered. Yeah, please feel free to reach out to Mr. Kumar Gupta here. Mr. Kumar on this number. He will be the right person if you are looking for to enroll. Yeah, feel free to ask any question if you have. I'm done.
Here, which tool mostly you are covered, JMeter or LoadRunner?
Okay, this is not a performance testing class. So I'm not going to talk about JMeter, the JMeter functionality. I'm not going to talk about that, how to record a script, how to correlate it. I'm not going to talk about this.
No, not. I'm not asking that one. You're saying
Right,
here
right.
integration with the CI/CD pipeline. So like
So we're gonna take JMeter. Yeah, I see. We're gonna take JMeter. I'm gonna tell you how to do with LoadRunner, but we have taken into JMeter. Yeah.
Yeah, because usually you are frequently switching both the tools. So if you demonstrate with LoadRunner as well as, I think it would be so helpful for everyone.
So see, it's all about plugins. Once I show you how to do with JMeter, you will understand how to do with LoadRunner as well.
Sure. Just a guide us to how to
Yes,
integrate same
yes.
with the LoadRunner.
I will do that.
And second point, I don't have personal laptop. Is that fine? I have a hobbyist laptop only.
It is perfectly fine. We are not going to install anything locally. We are going to install everything in the cloud. So if you have your office laptop, it's fine, because we are not going to install any software in your local.
Okay.
We're gonna create servers. We're gonna create servers in the cloud, and we're gonna work there. So it's perfectly fine.
Okay, and another one is I'm zero knowledge in Docker's containers, Kubernetes,
Right.
microservices. Is everything will cover, right? Will be perfect, right? If you follow all your instructions.
Perfect. See, this is what I have highlighted here. This is what I have highlighted here. You can see this. So the idea, all the topics are covered from very scratch. You don't need any prerequisite knowledge. So you are in the very right place. That's what I can tell you.
Okay. And we have a lifetime access, right, for all these videos.
Yes, lifetime access.
I think thanks for answering all my queries.
Sure. No problem. Yeah, any more questions, or we are done with the session? Okay, Vidya, how many days? So as I mentioned, right, that it will take around, it's a very, it takes some time. Okay, this course is not that, but we are covering a lot more things here. It's gonna take you 40 to 45 hours, right? You can calculate, it will take around 2 months. It will take around 2 months, because we are just devoting 1 hour every session. We will have just 5 hours every week. So if you calculate that, it is going to take 2 months. So yeah, around 40 days of the session. Yeah. Okay. So thank you, everyone. I think if you have any questions, feel free to ask me in the WhatsApp chat. I'll be happy, more than happy to help you there. And let's meet tomorrow. Okay, we're gonna continue this session, and you can talk to Mr. Kumar, looking to enroll, and we're gonna continue these things. This is the number of Mr. Kumar. You can get all the information in this link. You can talk to Mr. Kumar, and if you have any question, you have the WhatsApp chat. You can message there. I will be more than happy to answer you there. Okay. So thank you, everyone. We will connect tomorrow. Thank you.